There are moments that arrive without warning, moments so quiet they almost go unnoticed. Nothing dramatic marks their entrance. No raised voices, no clear decision, no obvious turning point, and yet something inside pauses. It is the moment before words form, before emotions rush forward to defend themselves, a moment where silence appears, not as absence, but as weight. In that pause, the world seems to lean closer, thoughts gather, memories surface, old habits stir. The instinct to explain, to correct, to react gently taps at the door of the heart. Silence feels uncomfortable here. It always has. It feels like standing still while everything else moves, like holding breath when the lungs beg for air. And so many times before, words have filled this space quickly, almost automatically, just to escape the discomfort. But this time feels different. This silence is not empty. It is full of awareness. It carries the echo of past moments when speaking brought no relief, when explanations dissolved into misunderstanding, when emotions offered openly were received carelessly. The body remembers these things, even when the mind tries to forget. In the stillness, there is a quiet recognition. Not every moment needs a response. They may not notice the pause. They may not recognize the effort it takes to remain still when reactions feel justified. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. But inside, a quiet tension unfolds. The heart weighs its options: speak and release the pressure, or stay silent and endure the unfamiliar calm. Silence has often been misunderstood. It is mistaken for weakness, for hesitation, for surrender. Yet in this moment, silence feels deliberate. It is not confusion holding the tongue still, it is awareness. It is the realization that words, once released, cannot be gathered back, and that some truths lose their power when spoken into the wrong space. There is a strange clarity that comes when one does not rush to be heard. The mind slows. Emotions soften. What once felt urgent begins to feel optional. The need to prove something fades, replaced by a gentler question: what is truly worth carrying forward? In this quiet moment, something subtle shifts. The silence becomes less of a void and more of a shelter. It offers protection from unnecessary conflict, from emotional exposure that may not be honored. It allows the self to remain intact, untouched by interpretations and assumptions that do not belong. The world often rewards those who speak quickly, who react visibly, who assert themselves loudly. But there is another kind of strength that grows in these pauses, a strength that does not compete for attention, a strength that does not need validation to exist. It settles quietly, like roots growing deeper beneath the surface. Here, in the stillness, self-respect begins to take shape, not as pride, not as defiance, but as a calm understanding of personal boundaries. The realization that inner peace does not require constant defense, that dignity can exist without explanation. This moment does not ask for applause. It does not promise immediate relief. It simply offers a choice: to sit with the silence long enough to understand it, to notice how it steadies the breath, how it grounds the emotions, how it creates space where clarity can enter. Nothing outward changes yet. The world continues as it always has. They continue with their assumptions, their expectations, their noise. But something inward has shifted. A quiet foundation has been laid. And from this place, a different kind of journey begins. One that does not rush forward but listens first. Silence does not remain gentle for long. After the initial calm, something begins to stir beneath it. The heart, unsettled by restraint, starts to press forward. Emotions that were held back now seek expression, not loudly but persistently. They arrive as tightness in the chest, as a restless breath, as thoughts that replay themselves again and again, searching for release. There is a familiar pull here. The feeling that something must be said, that remaining quiet means allowing misunderstanding to settle and harden. The mind forms sentences on its own, rehearsing explanations that may never be spoken. Each imagined word carries the hope of relief, of being seen clearly, of restoring balance. And yet, even as these words take shape internally, there is hesitation. They may never hear what is meant. That truth lingers quietly, tempering the urgency. Past experiences whisper reminders of how easily intentions are twisted, how emotions offered honestly can return altered and heavier than before. Still, the heart resists this knowledge. It wants to be understood. It wants fairness. It wants acknowledgement. This is where silence becomes uncomfortable. It no longer feels like refuge. It feels like restraint, like holding back tears or swallowing words that burn as they remain unspoken. The body responds as if preparing for defense. Muscles tighten. Breathing grows shallow. The urge to react sharpens, driven not by anger but by the desire to restore dignity through expression. There is nothing weak about this impulse. It is human. To want to explain oneself is to want connection, to want harmony. But in this moment, the question is not whether the emotion is valid. It is whether expression will bring peace or prolong unrest. The inner conflict deepens. Silence asks for patience, while emotion demands release. The mind stands between them, searching for certainty. It remembers how quickly words can escape control, how reactions can become confessions of vulnerability offered to those who may not protect them. And yet, remaining quiet feels like carrying a weight alone. Time seems to slow here. Each second stretches filled with unsaid thoughts. The temptation to break the silence grows stronger, fueled by the belief that speaking will bring closure. But beneath that belief lies uncertainty, a quiet awareness that some conversations do not resolve, they only continue, that some explanations invite more misunderstanding, not less. In this space, emotional discipline begins to form, not as suppression but as observation. Instead of acting on emotion, it is watched. Instead of releasing it outward, it is felt fully inward. The sensation is uncomfortable, but it is honest. Nothing is hidden, nothing is denied. There is a subtle strength in allowing emotion to exist without letting it lead. It teaches patience. It reveals the difference between needing to speak and needing to be heard. Often, the two are not the same. Speaking may satisfy the moment, but being heard requires readiness on both sides. They may not be ready. That realization settles slowly, softening the urgency, not as resignation but as clarity. The heart begins to understand that forcing understanding rarely creates it. That silence, though heavy, may be kinder than words that land on closed ears. In this uneasy quiet, something important is learned. Emotional discipline is not about control through force. It is about trust. Trust that emotions can pass without being acted upon. Trust that self-worth does not depend on immediate expression. Trust that peace can be chosen, even when the heart longs to respond. The silence remains, but it has changed. It is no longer empty. It holds awareness, restraint, and a growing sense of inner steadiness. The heart still feels, deeply and honestly, but it begins to sense that not every feeling requires a voice. Some are meant to be understood first, in the quiet, where they can soften before they are released. When words are withheld, interpretations rush in to take their place. Silence creates space, and into that space, assumptions quietly settle. They watch from a distance, drawing conclusions without asking, filling the quiet with meanings never intended. What was restraint becomes indifference in their eyes. What was reflection is mistaken for agreement or guilt. And slowly a familiar ache appears, the pain of being misunderstood. It is a lonely experience, this kind of misunderstanding. There is no argument to engage with, no clear accusation to answer. Only the subtle shift in how one is treated, the quiet change in tone, the feeling that something essential has been misread. And because nothing was said, it feels as though the misunderstanding cannot be corrected without breaking the silence that was so carefully chosen. The mind begins to question itself. Was the silence too much? Did it suggest something unintended? The urge to clarify returns, stronger now, driven not by emotion alone, but by the desire to restore truth. Being misunderstood carries a particular weight because it threatens identity. It challenges the sense of being known, of being seen as one truly is. They may speak about you in quiet ways, not openly, not directly, but through glances, through absence, through altered expectations. None of it is loud enough to confront, yet all of it is felt.
Silence, once a personal choice, now feels exposed, as though it has been taken and reshaped by others. There is an injustice in this moment. Not dramatic, not cruel, but persistent.
To be misunderstood without the chance to correct it feels like being judged without being heard. The heart tightens under the weight of it. The mind rehearses explanations again, imagining how easily everything could be cleared if only the right words were spoken. Yet beneath these imagined conversations lies a deeper realization. Understanding cannot be demanded. It cannot be forced into existence through perfect phrasing. Some people listen only for confirmation of what they already believe. In such spaces, words do not clarify. They complicate. This truth is difficult to accept. It asks for surrender, not of self-respect, but of control. The control over how one is perceived, the control over narratives that others create. Letting go of this control feels like loss at first. It feels like allowing an untruth to exist, unchecked. But slowly, something else becomes clear. Not everyone deserves access to your explanations. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. Some silence protects more than words ever could. Being misunderstood reveals something important about inner strength. It tests the foundation of self-worth. If identity depends on constant clarification, then peace remains fragile. But if self-understanding is solid, misunderstandings lose some of their power. They may never see the full picture. They may never understand the intention behind the silence. And that realization brings a quiet grief, not for them, but for the connection that will never fully form. It is a soft letting go, an acceptance that not all bridges are meant to be crossed. In this acceptance, the silence deepens. It is no longer just restraint. It becomes discernment, a choice rooted in knowing where truth will be honored and where it will be distorted. The need to be understood by everyone begins to loosen its grip. There is peace in this shift, though it arrives gently. The heart learns to sit with being unseen without trying to force visibility. It learns that integrity does not require constant defense, that self-respect can exist even when misunderstood. The silence remains, and so does the misunderstanding, but they no longer stand in opposition. They coexist, balanced by a growing inner clarity, a quiet understanding that the truth does not disappear simply because it is not recognized. It lives on, steady and intact within. After long moments of silence and misunderstanding, something begins to settle. The urgency to explain fades into a quieter awareness, one that notices how much energy has been spent carrying unsaid truths. The mind grows tired of rehearsing conversations that will never happen. The heart grows weary of holding explanations for those who never asked. There is a subtle exhaustion that comes from wanting to be understood by those who are not listening. It is not dramatic fatigue, but a slow draining, like water slipping through unseen cracks. Each unspoken thought adds weight, not because it must be carried, but because it is repeatedly lifted and set down again in the mind. In this stillness, an honest question arises. How much of this effort is necessary? How much of it serves peace, and how much only prolongs discomfort? The silence creates space for this question to be heard clearly, without emotion clouding it. The realization does not arrive suddenly. It unfolds gently, as realizations often do. It becomes clear that unsaid truths are not always burdens. Sometimes they are boundaries. Not every truth needs an audience. Not every thought requires validation to remain true. There is relief in this understanding, a quiet release. The weight of unsaid truths lightens when they are no longer viewed as obligations. They become choices instead. Choices to protect inner calm, to preserve dignity, to step away from cycles that demand constant emotional labor. The mind begins to notice patterns. How often explanations were offered in the past only to be misunderstood gain. How often vulnerability was met with dismissal or distortion. These memories do not surface to cause pain, but to provide clarity. They serve as evidence, gently guiding the realization forward. They were never truly listening, not in the way that invites understanding. And this recognition changes everything. It removes the pressure to perform clarity for those who have already decided what they wish to see. There is a quiet empowerment in letting go of the need to correct every misinterpretation. It does not mean agreeing with them. It means choosing not to engage in spaces where truth is not welcome. Silence, in this context, becomes an act of respect toward oneself. The heart begins to rest. Without the constant pull to explain, it finds room to breathe. Emotions soften, no longer pushed forward or held back with force. They are allowed to exist without needing to justify themselves. This is where inner power begins to reveal itself, not as dominance, not as control over others, but as sovereignty over one's own energy. The ability to decide where attention is placed, where words are spent, where emotion is invested. The realization deepens. Being understood is meaningful, but not essential to self-worth. What matters more is being aligned with one's own truth. When that alignment is strong, misunderstandings lose their sting. They may continue to believe what they believe. They may carry their version of events forward. And surprisingly, this no longer feels threatening. The inner world has grown steadier, less dependent on external agreement. Silence now feels different. It is no longer heavy with unsaid truths. It is spacious, protective, intentional. It holds the quiet confidence of someone who knows that not everything needs to be shared to remain real. In this space, a new clarity forms. The understanding that peace is not found in endless explanation, but in knowing when to stop explaining. That some truths are strongest when they are simply lived, not spoken. The weight lifts, not because everything has been resolved, but because something important has been released. The need to be constantly understood gives way to something gentler and stronger, the freedom to be at ease within oneself. With the weight of explanation set down, a different kind of strength begins to emerge. It does not announce itself. It does not push forward or demand recognition. It simply becomes present, steady and quiet, like a calm awareness that no longer feels the need to brace itself against the world. There is a subtle shift in how the self is held. No longer leaning outward, waiting for understanding or approval, it settles inward. The posture changes, not physically, but internally. A soft firmness replaces the tension that once lived there. This is strength without defense. It becomes clear that true power was never in having the last word. It was in knowing when words would cost more than they would give. There is dignity in this know. Wing, a quiet self-respect that does not rely on being seen to exist. They may continue to test the silence. They may mistake calm for passivity, or restraint for surrender. But these interpretations no longer disturb the inner balance. They belong to a world outside, while the strength being formed lives within. There is relief in no longer preparing for imagined confrontations. The mind, once busy crafting responses, begins to rest. Thoughts slow. Attention returns to the present moment. Without constant vigilance, the nervous system softens. This strength is not rigid. It does not harden the heart. Instead, it allows openness without vulnerability being carelessly exposed. Emotions are still felt deeply, but they are held with care. There is discernment now, a sense of what deserves access and what does not. Self-respect grows quietly here, not from proving worth, but from honoring it. It shows itself in small ways, choosing not to engage in draining conversations, stepping back without guilt, allowing silence to speak when words would only invite distortion. The realization settles that not responding is not the same as accepting harm. Silence can be a boundary, firm and clear, without needing explanation. It draws a line not for others but for the self. There is a calm satisfaction in this understanding, a sense of alignment. Actions and values begin to match. No longer is there the inner conflict between wanting peace and feeling obligated to speak. The choice becomes simple, guided by clarity rather than emotion. They may never recognize this strength. They may never acknowledge the restraint it takes to remain silent in moments where reaction feels justified. And that is acceptable now. Validation is no longer required. This kind of power does not depend on acknowledgement. It grows in the quiet moments, unseen and undisturbed. It is felt in the steadiness of breath, in the ease of not carrying what does not belong, in the freedom of not needing to explain oneself into understanding. There is also humility in this strength. It recognizes that silence is not always the answer, but it knows when it is. It is not about avoidance, but about wisdom, about choosing peace without denying truth. The inner world becomes more spacious. Without the constant noise of reaction, there is room for reflection, creativity, and presence. Life feels less like a series of defenses and more like a steady unfolding. In this space, self-trust deepens. Decisions are made quietly, confidently, without the need for justification. The self begins to feel whole, not fragmented by external opinions. The strength discovered here is gentle but unshakable. It does not resist, it does not chase. It stands quietly, rooted in self-respect. And in this stillness, there is a profound sense of freedom, the freedom to exist without defense, complete as one is. At some point, the choice becomes clear, not dramatic, not announced, but quietly understood. The moment arrives when reaction is no longer automatic, when the space between feeling and response widens just enough to allow a different path. In that space, stillness waits patiently. Choosing not to react is not the absence of feeling. Emotion still rises, familiar and strong, but it is met differently now. Instead of rushing outward, it is acknowledged inward, felt fully, without judgment, without urgency. The body notices it, the mind observes it, and together they allow it to pass without turning it into action. This choice feels unfamiliar at first. Reaction has always promised relief, a quick release of pressure. Stillness offers no such immediate reward. It asks for trust. Trust that not everything must be answered. Trust that peace can exist even when something feels unresolved. They may provoke without intention, or perhaps with it. Words may be said. Silences may be interpreted. Expectations may linger. All of it once demanded response. Now it is weighed quietly. Not everything deserves access to the inner world. There is a calm discipline in this restraint, not the kind that suppresses, but the kind that guides. It recognizes that reactions often give away power, placing control in the hands of whatever triggered them. Stillness keeps that power close, contained, protected. The nervous system begins to learn this new pattern. Where there was once tension, there is now pause. Where there was urgency, there is breath. The body no longer braces for conflict that may ever come. It begins to trust the silence. Choosing stillness does not mean disengaging from life. It means engaging selectively. It means knowing when presence is more powerful than response, when quiet observation speaks louder than explanation. There is dignity in this choice, a dignity that does not need to be displayed. It shows itself in composure, in emotional steadiness, in the refusal to be pulled into cycles that drain rather than deepen. They may not notice the difference immediately, or they may sense it and misinterpret it. But that no longer matters. The choice was never about changing them. It was about protecting something inward, Stillness creates distance, and in that distance, clarity grows. Without reaction clouding perception, situations are seen more clearly, motives become visible, patterns reveal themselves, what once felt personal begins to look predictable. This clarity brings peace, not because everything is resolved, but because nothing feels urgent anymore. The heart no longer races ahead trying to fix or defend. It stays present, grounded. There is also compassion here, not just for the self, but for others. Stillness allows understanding without entanglement. It makes room for empathy without sacrificing boundaries. Choosing silence over reaction is not a one-time decision. It is a practice. A quiet commitment made again and again each time emotion rises, and with each choice, the inner world grows steadier. The reward is subtle but profound. A sense of control that does not come from dominance, but from alignment. A calm confidence that does not need to prove itself. In this stillness, life slows just enough to be felt fully. Moments stretch, breaths deepen, the present becomes more vivid. The choice to remain still is not about avoiding conflict. It is about choosing peace where conflict would cost too much. It is about honoring the self enough to step back, to listen inwardly, to respond only when it truly matters. And so, stillness becomes a companion, not cold or distant but supportive, a quiet presence that holds the inner world steady, even when the outer world stirs. Walking away does not happen in a single step. It unfolds slowly, almost gently, as the need to stay begins to loosen its grip. There is no dramatic exit, no moment meant to be witnessed. It is an inward movement, a quiet turning toward oneself. At first there may be doubt, a lingering sense of whether something important is being left behind. Old habits question the decision, reminding of past attachments, familiar roles, unfinished conversations. But beneath this doubt, there is an unexpected steadiness, a calm that does not argue or explain, only reassures. Walking away here does not mean closing the heart. It means carrying it with care. It means choosing not to remain where peace must be constantly negotiated. The body recognizes this choice before the mind fully understands it. Breathing becomes easier. Shoulders soften. Constant background tension begins to fade. They may not notice the distance growing, or they may notice and misunderstand it. But the separation is not built on resentment. It is built on clarity, a clarity that understands that staying is sometimes more damaging than leaving quietly. There is strength in this departure, though it is not the kind that announces itself. It does not seek acknowledgement or justification. It simply moves forward, guided by inner alignment rather than external reaction. Silence accompanies this walk, not as loneliness, but as companionship. It no longer feels heavy. It feels supportive, like a steady presence that does not demand anything in return. Within this silence, thoughts settle. The mind rests. The heart feels intact. Walking away becomes an act of self-respect, not because others were wrong, but because the self deserves calm. This distinction matters. It removes bitterness from the choice. It allows the departure to be clean, unburdened by the need to be right. There is a quiet dignity in not explaining the decision to those who would not understand it anyway. The reasons are held privately, honored without being defended. This privacy feels protective, almost sacred. As distance grows, perspective follows. What once felt overwhelming now appears smaller, more contained. Patterns are seen clearly without emotion distorting them. The choice to walk away feels less like loss and more like release. Life does not suddenly become perfect. Challenges remain. Emotions still rise and fall. But there is a new steadiness beneath it all. A sense of being rooted, no longer easily pulled off balance by external noise. The inner world feels whole, not untouched, but healed enough to stand on its own. There is no urgency to replace what was left behind. Space has been created, and that space feels valuable. They continue on their path, carrying their own perceptions, their own stories, and that is allowed. The need to correct or control no longer exists. What matters now is the quiet integrity of staying aligned with oneself. Walking away becomes less about leaving others and more about arriving somewhere new internally. A place of calm self-trust. A place where silence is not feared and strength does not need to prove itself. There is peace here. Not excitement, not triumph, just peace. The kind that settles into daily life, into small moments, into the way one listens inwardly before moving outward. This is where the journey rests, not with answers, but with acceptance. Not with closure imposed, but with closure felt. The walk continues steady and unshaken, guided not by reaction, but by a quiet inner knowing. And in that knowing, there is nothing left to say,